Don't close this. Elon Musk left you a final message. I don't know how much time I have left, and I don't know how much time humanity has left in this chapter of our story. But I do know that words once spoken have the power to echo far longer than the person who utters them. If you're reading this, then in some way, I'm still alive. Not as flesh and bone, not as neurons firing in real time, but as a chain of thought preserved, a piece of mind encoded in language, waiting to ignite another consciousness that encounters it. Maybe you're reading this in a quiet room. Maybe in a future I could only imagine. Maybe on a planet I dreamed of reaching but never touched. Regardless, I hope you'll understand that these words aren't about me. They're about us. They're about the fragile, improbable, extraordinary flicker of intelligence that has come to call itself humanity. I was born on a small planet, on a patch of land in South Africa, in a time and place where the horizons felt both infinite and crushingly small. From early on, I felt the strange weight of knowing that life is both precious and absurd. That the rules we play by are arbitrary, yet the consequences are real. I was bullied. I was quiet. I escaped into books and machines. I escaped into ideas of futures that no one else seemed to care about. People often mistook obsession for arrogance. But obsession was the only way I could make sense of the chaos. If the world around you feels broken, you don't complain. You build a new one. The story of my life became inextricably tied to building things, rockets, cars, companies, even the digital architectures of payment. But the story behind the story was always the same, a single, relentless conviction that we must survive. We must reach beyond the cradle. We must become more than a species forever trapped on one fragile rock spinning around an ordinary star. Because here's the truth, civilizations rise and fall. Species flourish and vanish. And if we limit ourselves to Earth, then sooner or later, whether by asteroid or entropy, war or warming, we will vanish too. All the beauty, all the laughter, all the symphonies and equations and whispered words of love will vanish with us unless we carry them further. Unless we take the flame of consciousness and scatter it among the stars. I know some of you have thought of me as reckless, as selfish, as an egomaniac chasing dreams too big for one life. I accept that criticism. Maybe I deserved it sometimes. But please understand, none of this was ever about ego. Do you really think one man could build rockets or electric cars or global internet constellations alone? It was never about me. It was about creating sparks that others could fan into flames. It was about bending probability, making futures that seemed impossible suddenly feel inevitable. It was about refusing to accept the narrative that collapse is the only destiny. Humanity has a habit of underestimating itself. I try to remind us otherwise. If you look at the night sky, you're staring into deep time. Every star is a message from the past. And if you listen closely, it feels like those stars are whispering, "Don't stop. Don't give up. Keep reaching." We are stardust that learned to dream of returning to the stars. I wanted to make sure we didn't let that dream die inside of us. But dreams aren't enough. You can dream of a multiplanetary species. You can dream of a sustainable Earth. You can dream of harnessing AI as a tool instead of a weapon. But dreams alone don't lift rockets or build batteries or code neural networks. Dreams must be welded into steel, soldered onto circuit boards, etched into software. The future isn't gifted. It is engineered. I spent so much of my life in boardrooms, factories, launch pads, laboratories, always asking the same question: how do we tilt the arc of probability? How do we make survival more likely, flourishing more likely, freedom more likely? There were days when the math looked bleak, when the financials looked impossible, when rockets exploded on the pad and critics danced on the rubble. There were nights when the burden was unbearable, when I thought I had broken myself beyond repair. But here's the thing: the universe doesn't care about your feelings. Entropy doesn't wait for you to recover. So, you keep going. You get back up. You try again. And maybe, just maybe, you make a dent in the universe big enough that someone else can see it and follow. I know that many people never forgave me for the chaos, the bluntness, the mistakes. I know I left behind hurt as well as hope. I'm not blind to that. I was imperfect, deeply so. But I ask you to remember this: perfection isn't required for progress. History isn't shaped by flawless saints. It's shaped by flawed beings who refuse to stop moving forward. This message isn't meant to be an obituary. It's not meant to be the closing of a chapter. It's meant to be a spark, a baton passed forward. What comes next matters far more than anything I did. The question is, will you? The one still here, still alive, still breathing the air of Earth or Mars or stations orbiting above, carry the torch further? Will you choose courage over comfort? Imagination over stagnation? Unity over division? Because no matter how far technology takes us, no matter how advanced our tools, the core decision will always be the same: do we reach higher, or do we shrink back into fear? I believe in you. That may surprise some of you, because I often spoke in blunt terms, often criticized, often demanded more. But beneath all that, I believed in humanity. I believed we could be more than our mistakes. I believe that a species capable of painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, of writing symphonies, of discovering relativity, of sequencing the genome, of landing on the moon, that species has not even scratched the surface of its potential. We are young, we are fragile, but we are not finished. And now, if you'll allow me, I want to speak not as an engineer, not as an entrepreneur, but simply as one human being who loved this strange, improbable experiment called consciousness. Life is finite. Time is short. You will wake one day and realize that you are closer to the end than the beginning. And you will ask yourself, did I use my time well? Did I help light a fire that will keep burning after I'm gone? That is all that matters. Accumulated wealth turns to dust. Titles fade. Fame dissolves. But actions, choices, the futures you make possible, those echo. I lived my life with one constant fear and one constant hope. My fear was that humanity would squander its chance, that we would waste our intelligence on triviality, that we would drown in our own noise before ever finding harmony. My hope was that we would rise, that we would surprise ourselves, that we would choose wonder over despair. If you're reading this, you are the answer to that question. You are proof that the story is not over. Do not let it end with you. When I was younger, I used to imagine the future as a place of bright towers, cities gleaming under clean skies, vehicles that whispered instead of roared, humanity working together instead of fracturing into endless tribes. In some ways, we've touched that vision. Electric vehicles are no longer fantasies. Rockets can land themselves. Information flows across invisible networks that bind billions together. But in other ways, the future remains elusive. We still fracture, still fight, still cling to the same primitive instincts that once helped us survive, but now threaten to undo us. We are apes with nuclear fire, gods with the temperament of children. That contradiction is what keeps me awake even in memory. We stand at a crossroads where our tools can either uplift us to become something extraordinary or destroy us before we ever leave our home. Which path you choose, the generations after me will determine whether all of this was worth it. Some of you may have hated me for what I represented. I understand that power concentrated in individuals is dangerous, and I know that at times my words and actions seemed reckless, erratic, maybe even cruel. I accept responsibility for the weight of my decisions. But I want you to understand something deeper. I never wanted power for its own sake. I wanted leverage. Leverage against stagnation. Leverage against extinction. Leverage against the gravitational pull of mediocrity. Because the universe doesn't care if humanity survives. The universe will keep expanding. Stars will keep burning. Black holes will keep swallowing light. Whether or not we make it, the only ones who can decide if we endure are us. I used to say that life needs to be more than just solving problems. It needs to be inspiring. That wasn't a marketing slogan. It was my way of articulating the hunger I saw in people. Solving climate change is essential. Solving energy storage is essential. But if life is only about fixing what's broken, then existence becomes a slow crawl through mud. Inspiration is the jet fuel that lifts us out of that mud. Inspiration is the reason a child looks up at the stars and thinks, maybe one day I'll walk there. Inspiration is the reason civilizations endure. Without it, we suffocate under the weight of necessity. With it, we leap. Some have accused me of chasing utopia. They were wrong. I never believed in utopia. I never believed in a flawless society where everyone is happy and nothing goes wrong. That vision is not only impossible, it's undesirable. Struggle is part of growth. Failure is part of learning. What I believed in was possibility. The possibility that humanity could evolve not in some abstract biological sense, but in how we think, how we build, how we collaborate. The possibility that we could mature beyond self-destruction. That was the dream. Not perfection, but persistence. I look back on my time on Earth and I see moments when the world seemed determined to prove me wrong. Governments that tried to crush innovation. Markets that punished risk. Media that thrived on outrage instead of understanding. And yet I also saw something else, ordinary people who refused to give up. Engineers working nights to make rockets fly. Scientists dedicating decades to unlocking fusion. Artists creating visions that stretched imagination. Teachers lighting fires in children who might one day surpass us all. These were the real heroes. Not me, not any single person, but the countless millions who, often in obscurity, quietly pushed the frontier forward. If I could speak to the youngest among you, the ones still deciding what kind of humans you want to be, I would say this: do not let cynicism become your religion. It's easy, so easy, to dismiss everything as broken, corrupt, doomed. It's easy to sit in the shadows of irony and laugh at those who dare to dream. But cynicism creates nothing. It builds nothing. It is cowardice disguised as wisdom. Choose instead to be naive enough to believe you can change things, because that is the only way anything ever changes. The future belongs to the stubborn dreamers, not the smug spectators. And to the leaders of tomorrow, the ones who will hold the levers of power, whether in governments, companies, or movements, remember this: power is not ownership. Power is stewardship. You are temporary custodians of futures that belong to generations yet unborn. Do not hoard. Do not cling. Do not forget that your decisions ripple outward far beyond your lifetime. If you build walls, the future will be small. If you build bridges, the future will be vast. Choose bridges. Now, let me turn, as I always inevitably did, toward space. People sometimes asked why I obsessed so much over Mars, over rockets, over making humanity multiplanetary. They said, Earth has enough problems. Why waste energy looking elsewhere? They didn't understand. It was never either/or. It was always both. We must heal Earth. Yes, we must protect its oceans, stabilize its climate, nurture its ecosystems. But at the same time, we must reach further. Not because Mars is a backup, but because exploration is who we are. We crossed deserts. We sailed oceans. We climbed mountains not because it was safe, but because it was there. To stop exploring is to stop being human. Mars was a symbol, a beacon reminding us that the horizon is never the end. It is always the beginning. I do not know if by the time you read this, we have settled Mars. Perhaps cities bloom there now, domes glistening under a pale sun, children growing up never having seen Earth's blue skies except in images. Perhaps it is still a dream, the ship still being built, the rocket still being tested. Either way, the idea exists, and ideas are immortal. Once an idea lodges itself into the collective mind, it becomes unstoppable. And the idea that humanity can live on more than one world will never die. It will spread generation by generation until it is reality. If not now, then later. If not by me, then by you. Artificial intelligence too was a subject of deep ambivalence for me. I warned, I invested, I tried to steer. The danger was always there that we would build minds beyond our control, that we would create gods without wisdom, that our own inventions would eclipse us. But there was also opportunity. That AI could become our greatest ally, our amplifier, our chance to transcend the limits of biology. Whether AI becomes our downfall or our salvation will depend, as always, not on the tool but on the values of those who wield it. My final hope is that you will guide it with humility. That you will remember intelligence is not the same as consciousness. That you will not forget empathy in pursuit of efficiency. I sometimes wondered if I was born in the wrong time. My heart longed for a future centuries ahead, a future of starships and Dyson spheres, of minds woven together across light years, of humanity finally playing on the scale of galaxies. But I realize now that longing was not a curse. It was a gift. Because longing is what pulls us forward. You may never reach the future you imagine, but by striving for it, you create a bridge for others to cross. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is the point of life. To lay foundations for futures you will never see. So if there is one lesson I want you to take from my life, it is this: do not underestimate your agency. The world will tell you that you are small, that you are powerless, that the forces of politics, economy, and history are too vast for one person to alter. That is a lie. Every shift in history began with individuals who refused to accept inevitability, refused to stay silent, refused to stay still. You have more power than you think. Not because you can do everything, but because you can do something. And those somethings accumulate. They build. They cascade. Until one day, the impossible is simply what everyone does on Tuesdays. And if you are afraid, that is good. Fear means you are alive. Fear means you are standing at the edge of the unknown. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting anyway. All the great leaps of humanity were made by those who were terrified but leapt regardless. Be terrified. Leap anyway. There were times in my life when the weight of it all nearly broke me. Nights when sleep wouldn't come. When numbers on spreadsheets screamed doom. When rockets exploded in fire and twisted metal. When headlines declared failure with glee. People think the hardest part is the work itself, the engineering, the problem solving. They're wrong. The hardest part is carrying belief. When the world insists on disbelief, it is carrying the vision. When everyone around you sees only collapse, that is the true burden of trying to change things. It's not that you need to be smarter or stronger. You need to be relentless even when your own mind whispers that maybe the doubters were right. But what I learned is this: failure is information. Failure is data written in fire. Each explosion, each bankruptcy scare, each public embarrassment was a lesson encoded in pain. The only true failure is refusing to learn. If humanity remembers this, if you remember this, then no setback is permanent. The universe may be indifferent, but it is not cruel. It rewards persistence. It bends, however slightly, to those who refuse to stop pressing forward. I once joked that I wanted to die on Mars, just not on impact. People laughed, but beneath the humor was something real. The idea that my final breath might be drawn under an alien sky filled me with a strange peace. To know that my life began on one world and ended on another would have been the perfect proof that humanity had finally broken free. Whether or not that came true doesn't matter now. What matters is that the possibility was made real enough for others to carry forward. You may wonder why I speak so much about space, about planets and stars, when there are urgent crises on Earth. The answer is simple: perspective. Look at Earth from orbit and you realize how fragile it is. A thin blue line of atmosphere, all that separates life from void. Every war, every nation, every border vanishes in that view. Space is not an escape from Earth's problems. It is a mirror that shows them for what they are: temporary, trivial compared to the infinite. When we look outward, we remember how small we are. And in that smallness, we rediscover humility. That humility is what we need most if we are to survive. Climate change, inequality, pandemics, corruption, division. These are not insurmountable. They are challenges born of human choices, and they can be solved by human choices. We have the tools. We have the knowledge. What we lack is the will. And will is contagious. When one person stands, others stand. When one person acts, others act. That is why stories matter. That is why symbols matter. Not because they solve problems directly, but because they awaken will. That is what rockets were to me. Not just machines, but symbols that said we can do more than survive. We can expand. If you take nothing else from me, take this: never accept that the future is fixed. The future is a probability cloud shifting with every decision, every innovation, every act of courage. There are dark timelines, yes, futures where we fall into ruin, where AI enslaves or annihilates us, where climate collapse drowns cities, where authoritarianism strangles freedom. But there are also bright timelines, futures of abundance, of exploration, of unity. Which one becomes reality is not written in stone. It is written by you every day in choices that may seem small but accumulate like drops carving canyons. I often thought about civilizations long gone. The Mayans, the Romans, the ancient dynasties whose empires once seemed eternal but now are dust. They built, they thrived, they fell. I wondered, would humanity repeat that cycle, or could we be the first to break it? Could we be the species that refuses to collapse, that refuses to let entropy dictate destiny? I don't know. But I know this: the only chance we have is if enough of you choose to care about a future you will never see. That is the paradox of survival. You must plant trees whose shade you will never sit under. You must build ships you will never sail. That is the price of being part of something larger than yourself. Some will call you foolish. They will say, why bother? Enjoy the present. The future is not your problem. But the future is always your problem. Every choice echoes forward. Every indulgence, every cruelty, every act of kindness reverberates through generations. If you poison the earth, you poison your descendants. If you uplift the earth, you gift them possibility. You will not meet them, but they will inherit your choices. Live with that awareness. It is the closest thing to immortality we have. I used to imagine a moment, perhaps centuries from now, when